Hello and welcome to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, insight and analysis on the most important of the least important things, football. I'm Ronan Murphy and I'm delighted to be joined for a Transfers podcast extra by Nizaar Kinsella, or Kinsella as it should be, because that Irish heritage. We had Mark Kinsella playing for Ireland on BBC and Mark Kinsella playing for Ireland on RT back in the day. So delighted to have you here, Nizaar, to look at an iconic Chelsea transfer in one of our Transfers podcasts extra specials.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, definitely an iconic one. I think maybe one of the most consequential transfers in Chelsea's history, and one that happened twice. So yeah, we get two bites at the cherry, right?
Yeah, and he maybe he didn't live up to the hype at Chelsea, but we'll see why that was. And before we get into the nitty gritty, I have to remind listeners and viewers, because this is on YouTube as well, you can see Nizaar and myself. You can obviously see him regularly on BBC and Football Focus and stuff like that. But if you want to see him on our YouTube channel, you can check out there. But before that, please fill in our listener survey. The link is in the comments, etc. And we get on with the show. So the player we're focused on is Lukaku, the one and only. He was a huge player for Anderlecht. He broke through as a teenager. He made his debut for Anderlecht just less than 2 weeks after he turned 16, because he wasn't allowed, obviously. He had been kind of unreal for their youth teams and in youth football. And in Belgium, he had scored 93 goals in 131 games for the youth teams. He came on, made his debut in his first proper season in the Jupiler Pro League. He scored coming off the bench in his first start in that, and went on to score 15 goals in his first season. He was still 16, made his Belgium debut at 16, scored in the Europa League at 16, and then his father had been a Zaire or DR Congo international, and he watched him score against Athletic Club in the Europa League, and he wasn't that impressed that his son got booked in the second half of the game, and he said that first I congratulated Romelu, but after that I put him in his place. So he obviously had a difficult upbringing, which turned him into Belgium's greatest striker. He made his Belgium debut at 16, like I said. Vincent Kompany said he was a gift from heaven. And then he went and played another season for Anderlecht, and Chelsea came in.
Yeah, he was well known, I think, at this point as being like one of the top young talents in football. I mean, I think that at Anderlecht, he became the youngest scorer in European football. Nobody had ever scored younger than he was. And I think back then it was a major achievement. It still is now. His record was finally broken this season, actually, by Michael Noonan of Shamrock Rovers, which you'll know about. But in those days, I think, the Europa League, the Champions League was very high level, Conference League a bit lower level. So yeah, amazing player. Everyone knew about him. So there was no hiding that this 16-year-old who had a huge stature, we knew him when he was older as well, as being a big, strong boy. But to see a 16-year-old who looked like a man playing against men, scoring goals, was just amazing. So everyone knew about him. It was just a case of where would he go?
Yeah, and I think even before he signed that first contract with Anderlecht, when he was still 15, I suppose it would have been at the time, that Chelsea were interested in. At that time, further Bremen wanted to bring him to the Bundesliga. AC Milan, Inter were interested in bringing him to Italy. He said that he wasn't going to move to Italy because he didn't think he would get a chance there. The youth players under 20, as he saw, didn't really get a chance in Italy. So he wanted to stay with Anderlecht and develop there. And he even said that he would stay at Anderlecht until he was 20. But Chelsea came in and they swooped when he was just 18.
Yeah, exactly. I think Anderlecht is it's a bit like Chelsea, very similar, both a very high level academy. So he sort of had that upbringing. Chelsea would have played him a lot in European tournaments. A lot of these other clubs that you mentioned would have played against him and struggled to cope with him when they brought their youth teams up against that Anderlecht team. I remember speaking to one of the sort of former Anderlecht coaches who worked with him at that time, and just simply at academy level that teams couldn't deal with him. So yeah, Chelsea scouting was very extensive, and they would have known. But I think that the key really for Chelsea to win the race was Michael Emenalo. He had huge contacts in Belgium It wasn't just Lukaku they signed, but they got De Bruyne, Courtois, of course, Eden Hazard, although he was at Lille, they got him in. So yeah, and then there's Charlie Masonda as well, who probably would have been a top player had it not been for injuries. So Chelsea just dominated that sort of golden generation of Belgian football. They really got in there. It was a combination of Abramovich's riches, the academy scouting, and then Michael Emenalo's sort of contacts out in Belgium that sort of led them to the charge. And it was Emenalo who actually convinced Abramovich to put his hand in his pocket for Lukaku. He's now the Saudi sporting director, by the way, Emenalo, but he sort of convinced Abramovich to put his hand in the pocket for Lukaku to sign him and the other Belgians as well, and they were all a success apart from De Bruyne, who had to go away to be successful, right? So yeah, but what a player he became as well.
Yeah, well, I suppose Lukaku probably wasn't a success. He had to go away too to become a success. But yeah, at the time, there was obviously haggling over the fee. Anderlecht wanted 15 million. Chelsea agreed an initial 12 million, and then that was to rise to 20 million, depending on Premier League and your European appearances. And his agent at the time believed that the add-ons would mean that he would remain at Chelsea for years and years, and Anderlecht wanted to bring him back on loan, but I think Chelsea wanted him to develop. But initially he kind of developed at the reserves rather than being thrown in at the deep end, despite the fact he was a Belgium international. He had scored in Europe, he scored against Ajax, he scored in the knockout rounds of European competitions at just 16, 17. So yeah, Chelsea didn't really usher him in straight away. I think they had a load of kind of senior players at the time that were capable of scoring goals. Sturridge, Torres, Drogba obviously was there. So yeah, it wasn't a kind of, when you see a player maybe being signed now, they're just immediately expected to perform. That wasn't the case for Lukaku.
Yeah, and remember Chelsea at this time, they weren't a team that was bringing through young players, so it was probably a bit of a gamble. I know he said that about Italy, but it was a bit of a gamble because they didn't have a track record of playing teenagers in the first team. So yeah, he was backing himself, but we've got to remember as well that Lukaku, he grew up a Chelsea fan. His idol was Didier Drogba. I think that he's somebody he identified with, although I think often they were unfairly compared while he was at Chelsea because they were both big strikers. They maybe had some similarities with hairstyle maybe or something like that. But actually, when you really dug into it and looked at the style of play, for me, they were very different. And I always found the comparison was unfair. And I think when he was a teenager, certainly, I don't think it helped Romelu Lukaku that he was being compared to his idol, even though it was his idol that sort of maybe attracted him to Chelsea and maybe said, I want to play for Chelsea, I want to live my dream. And I think that was very much what he was thinking at the time when he joined from Anderlecht.
Yeah, and it was, like I said, he didn't come in and he wasn't a first team player easily. And his agent kind of even expressed that he'd be allowed to grow with these better players. His agent said it's not like Chelsea expect 30 goals from him right away. And he didn't score anything in the first season. He only played something like 158 minutes for Chelsea. And like I said, they had all these forwards and even midfielders and other players, Ramirez and Lampard, Mata, all scored over 10 goals in that first season. But he did play a few minutes and he was around when Chelsea won the Champions League, but he wouldn't put his hands on the trophy. Kalou gave him the trophy or put the trophy in his lap, but he said that it wasn't me, it was my team that won. I don't like people talking to me about the Champions League, what he said at the time. So yeah, he was there kind of a season, but he was just learning the Premier League or learning England, but he kind of had to move away to West Brom to get game time then.
I think that the West Brom loan was pretty important at the time. Like, he had to go away, he had to play football. It's one of those where, he just has to play football and the young players not playing enough. And Chelsea had other options up front at the time. So, yeah, I just remember the final game of the season, he scored a hat-trick, I think, against Manchester United in Sir Alex Ferguson's last game. But certainly I think at that point he would have been a success anywhere. He was that good. It was just that Chelsea was maybe a place he wasn't quite ready for at that time. But eventually I think he still exited Chelsea. Unfortunately, he did all he could on loan, but there still wasn't a place for him when he came back. So that led to sort of the transfer, right?
Yeah. That season, obviously, he scored 17 Premier League goals, which was more than any Premier League player, and that earned him a move. Like you said, he wasn't ready for Chelsea, but he was ready to step up after that time at West Brom, so he stepped up to Everton. He played in the Super Cup before that. He missed the decisive penalty against Manuel Neuer in the Super Cup, but yeah, you can't have everything. A lot of pressure on a young guy. Obviously, he went on loan to Everton. He scored 15 goals, and then Everton bought him for €32 million or £28 million. It was at the time, and at Everton he was pretty good. At Man United, following that, he was pretty good. At Inter Milan, he was pretty good. Yeah, he kind of found his feet elsewhere. Even, I suppose at that time you were probably kind of following to see how he would get on. That would he kind of do what he had done, what Chelsea wanted him to do at these other clubs.
It's worth noting, though, as well, that when he went to Everton, he was a success, and Chelsea were very interested. I was actually at a game that Everton played against Chelsea around this time, and you could see Michael Emenalo was talking to Romelu Lukaku after the game at Goodison Park, and you just knew what the conversation was about. And it was a summer where it was Antonio Conte's second season at Chelsea, and they went into that transfer market with actually quite a lot of money. Chelsea, they had a lot of money to play with. Conte just won the Premier League, by the way. And they wanted to sign a striker because, although they won the Premier League, they were having problems. Diego Costa was starting to force his way out. So they were looking for a striker, and Lukaku was number one on the shortlist of Chelsea and Manchester United. Now, everyone thought he was going to go back to Chelsea. I saw that in the tunnel. I just felt like it's going to happen. He was clearly Antonio Conte's first choice, but Man United actually beat Chelsea to the race. They were more aggressive when it came to financing. Mourinho got involved because he was manager of United at the time, and he called him. And Chelsea ended up missing out. And both United and Chelsea as well had Morata as their second choice on the shortlist. So lo and behold, Morata ends up joining Chelsea, struggles. Lukaku does pretty well for United, but I wouldn't say he was unbelievable. But certainly his goal record's good. That probably you'd say, could he have done more in big games? And that was maybe a criticism in English football that was thrown his way quite a lot. But yeah, that was a summer that was very pivotal for Chelsea. They missed out. Conte was furious. They missed out on him, but not only him. They wanted Van Dijk. They wanted Kyle Walker. They wanted several others. And then Chelsea sort of imploded under Conte. He wouldn't get to play with Romelu in attack until they reunited at Inter Milan. And what should have happened probably at Chelsea at that time happened later at Inter Milan. And they absolutely got on like a house on fire. I don't think Lukaku ever had a better manager for him than Conte. Of course, he's playing with him now as well at Napoli and doing and been doing pretty well. They were a match made in heaven, and what Conte did was take his game to another level, refined him physically. So actually Lukaku really slimmed down under him, and the physical regime that's brutal under Conte really benefited a player of his sort of size and stature and pace as well. And then technically as well, Conte really worked on him because, like I said, the comparisons to Didier Drogba were pretty unfair because Lukaku was this great running in behind striker, maybe playing a little bit off the right so he could cut inside and shoot. But he wasn't actually a back to the goal striker. He wasn't a traditional target man, but Conte worked with him in a way that added that sort of back to play, link up play, all this sort of stuff. And probably where he wasn't strong from just being a big guy, big quick guy, he sort of added it to his game technically and sort of became a complete player, which, he was the star man in Italy when they won the Scudetto under Conte at Inter. And then that sort of sets up his sort of return to Chelsea.
Yeah, and obviously he succeeds when he has the right coach, and I think that's some of his Belgium success has obviously come down to succeeding under the right coach and coaches knowing what to do with him. And you mentioned Mourinho wanted to bring to Man United. I had read that Mourinho, even when he was at Anderlecht, Mourinho even contacted him before he moved to Chelsea. That while Mourinho was the Real Madrid boss, to even chat to him, and he's kind of always been on the radar because he was this kind of wonder kid coming through. He continued it into senior level, and then although he had that blip at Chelsea, he kind of redeveloped. He left Chelsea. He played kind of 7 seasons elsewhere after a permanent exit. He scored 193 goals, and then he comes back to Chelsea for £97.5 million, €115 million to make him the kind of the player with the most fees in world football. Even Neymar didn't have as many. I think 327 million at the time, if my maths don't prove me wrong in euro. So yeah, he's another big money move back to Chelsea. And how did that come about? Or I suppose it's pretty obvious. They just wanted a goal scorer, and he had proven himself.
Well, yeah, let's remember where Chelsea were at this time. They just won the Champions League. But if you remember when Chelsea won the Champions League in 2021 under Thomas Tuchel, it was sort of a really dogged, aggressive, clean sheet approach, defensive, and they were just lacking a striker. They had Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, and Mason Mount as their front three. And Mount was probably the most clinical one of the three. Werner and Havertz were not bagging goals. So I think everyone at that time was like, Tuchel's just sorted the defence out here. This is a rock solid team. Imagine if you put a 30-goal a season striker in the mix and what they could do. And I think that was the thinking at Chelsea as well. They were thinking, who can we get that would really just do the business here? And they sort of were in touch over it was a British transfer record at the time. So that fee you mentioned, that sort of, it was 100 million in total. It was 97.5, but there was a couple 2 point whatever it was that was going to agents and stuff like that. So it was a 100 million deal. It was really the first one in English football, and they just saw him as the missing piece of the puzzle, just slot into that attack and go in. And yeah, they were aggressive. He was the main target that summer. He was going to complete the team, and he got the biggest wage, I think, that Chelsea have ever paid to a player. So he was on £300,000 a week. Chelsea have never paid more for a player than that. And he ended up getting the full VIP treatment when he signed. He sort of ended up on Roman Abramovich's yacht. This is what Chelsea do a lot with their big signings. They fly them into the south of France, get them on the yacht. You meet the owner. Like, it would always sort of blow the player away because Abramovich knew his football. He was one of the richest men in the world. You go on this yacht and you're like, wow, this is a serious fella. He really wants me. And I think from there on in, it was just pretty much as straightforward as a deal of this size could be to sort of getting him in. It was just very much a big signing. Marina Granovskaya, the former director at Chelsea, she was the one leading the charge. She got it done with agent Federico Pastorello. Rock Nation were also involved in the deal as well. So it was a big operation. A lot of people got paid, and yeah, Chelsea got their man, and the whole unveiling as well. It was all about him coming home, coming back to the team. There's a lot made of how he supported Chelsea. Like I mentioned earlier, he was a Chelsea fan. There was real confidence, actually, that this is the guy that's going to make the difference and that he would fit Tuchel's system. And there was nothing to suggest that he wouldn't, actually. But yeah, it probably went a little bit wayward, the move. I think I'm being a bit generous there. It was probably a bit of a disaster all in, and it was a shame. Didn't work out for various reasons.
Yeah, so then I suppose the big question that anybody watching or anybody listening wants to know for sure: why didn't it work out the second time?
Well, I remember Tuchel in a lot of the big games, he was trying a lot of stuff out with Lukaku, and he was struggling to get like connections. I remember he used to say the only player that can really read what Lukaku is doing is Mateo Kovacic, but they're not playing like directly together, close to each other. He felt like there was a disconnect between Lukaku and the rest of the team. He sort of dropped in this star striker, and you'd expect him to be linking well with the other players. I mean, at Inter, he had Lautaro Martinez, who they had a great connection with. But at Chelsea, he found no such player that he could work with. I think that Werner probably didn't have the technique to play the balls into him the way he wanted to. They both wanted to play on the shoulder. It didn't really work with him. Havertz was probably not playing when he was around. There was, and Havertz probably would rather be in that number 9 position. And at Chelsea, Havertz struggled to find an identity for himself. Mount, it just didn't hit it off with Mount particularly well. So yeah, that was a big problem initially. Then Lukaku got injured around about November, and he was out. Chelsea was actually playing pretty well without him. And then Lukaku got back in December, and he wanted to play more, and he was on the bench a lot. And Tuchel was like there putting a star striker on the bench. He was getting frustrated. A lot of the way it was painted at the time was actually that Chelsea were waiting for him to build his fitness up so he was fit, he was ready to play, but he wasn't like match fit, if you get me. He wasn't like super fit, super in his top condition. So Chelsea kept holding him back for a few match weeks, and this is a guy you signed as a star player, and he got frustrated and then went and did an unsanctioned interview with Sky Italia in December, and this was the real smoking gun moment that really, for me, wrecked his Chelsea career. So he did this interview, and he sort of said that Thomas Tuchel was holding him back. It was sort of vague criticism towards him. It wasn't like, I don't like the manager, but it was criticism of the manager, his selections, how he was using him. So that was sort of showing the frustration on his side. And then he also talked about maybe returning to Italy someday as well. So that just went down really badly. It was almost like a nuclear option. For me, I don't think Romelu Lukaku knew probably how bad it would go down, but what he said really went down badly. And then Chelsea tried to rescue the situation. Marina Granovskaya, who I mentioned earlier, the director, she was basically working for Abramovich, signing players. She acted as mediator between Tuchel and the player, and they had like these behind the scenes meetings to try and fix things. And yeah, they fixed it enough that they could reintroduce him. They fined him. They made him do a public apology on video. So really, it was quite embarrassing, the whole episode, for Lukaku more than Chelsea, I'd say, because Chelsea really put him out there and said, like, you caused this problem. You've got to fix it now. And they went and did that. They did this whole like exercise to try and fix the damage. But for me, from what I saw afterwards, it was never the same again. The relationship between him and Tuchel, but also probably a factor that goes under the radar as well is Lukaku's Chelsea fan, and his relationship with the Chelsea fans from that moment on was incredibly poor, because he would get booed in the stadium. His name wouldn't get cheered when it was read out before matches. This is your star striker, by the way. And there was no sense of him being the star after that. And I think that lack of love really affected him, affected his performances. Also, Chelsea fans, if they're going to pick a side at this time, they're going to pick a side with the guy who won the Champions League, not the guy who came in and caused problems. So, it was a really messy situation. And I think actually, and we see this a lot at Chelsea, the reaction of the supporters really affected the situation, and he just couldn't play. And by the end of the season, he had a poor end to the season. He had a terrible game away at Crystal Palace, where I think he touched the ball 9 times, and it was like one of the record low totals a player has touched a ball in a match in the Premier League. And he had these sort of games where he was just horrendous. And it just sort of was going to the point where you were like, how are they going to resolve this? And Chelsea eventually found a way to resolve it in a very strange way. Typical Chelsea fashion. They get sanctioned Roman Abramovich gets sanctioned because of the war in Russia and Ukraine. Yeah, we're going that big, we're going that deep. And the ownership changes. So suddenly Abramovich and Granovskaya, who probably would have tried to fix it, tried another season at least to try and see what would happen. Tuchel, without a sporting director, without Abramovich there, without the guys who paid 100 million, he managed to force out Lukaku out of Chelsea. And Lukaku is happy as well to oblige. I don't think under Abramovich's ownership that would have happened, because I think they would have tried to keep it all together, tried to say, look, guys, we spent money, we're making this work. But because the new guys didn't buy Lukaku, they were like, what do you need, Thomas? And Thomas took that power, pushed him out. Lukaku's happy to oblige, because I think there was a sense of embarrassment about how the fans felt about him. And I think also there was just a sense of, I don't want to work with Tuchel. I'll be better off in Italy, where I felt comfortable, where I played well. And then, he ends up leaving eventually. But yeah, it was so interesting that summer, because I went to LA to cover Chelsea in the pre-season, and that's where Chelsea's new owners were from. They're American, Todd Bowley, Clear Lake Capital. They're from LA. And when we were speaking with the people around it, the new project, it was so vibrant and exciting. Tuchel was at the heart of every decision being made, and very much there was a sense of, our bigger priority than signing a player is getting Lukaku out. And they had big agents working on that, pushing Lukaku out, and it was complicated because the money was so high that was involved in it, but they got something done. And Lukaku went out for quite a large loan fee, but it was still sort of an unmitigated disaster. And when you look back at the figures paid and the sort of return on investment, it's not been good. So yeah, it goes down as a failing for Chelsea. It's kind of a sad tale, because I think in another reality, it maybe could have worked out if he doesn't do that interview, or if Abramovich stays, there could have been a way that it works out. And hey, if Tuchel was sacked in September that year, if Tuchel was replaced by another manager, Tuchel didn't even like Lukaku, that other manager might have been like, well, I like him. And still to this day, Chelsea haven't really got a convincing number 9. And when I've been covering Chelsea in the years, when he's been on loan, there's always been the question, why don't you just bring Lukaku back? Because he's scoring in Italy. Like, he might not be a superstar in England. He might not be as good in England as he is in Italy, but surely he's still going to score goals for you. And the questions were no, no, no. And I think now the Chelsea regime probably wouldn't want to pay his wages, because, as I mentioned earlier, he's the highest ever paid Chelsea player. I don't think Chelsea would have liked that situation to continue under this ownership when they're driving down the wages.
Yeah, he's probably a bit too old for Chelsea now, given the signings they make these days. And if he was back at 16 and Anderlecht again, then he would be the first name on the shortlist probably. Yeah. But now not so much. I think he's been around the block a bit too much. But he's been around the block and he's scored all the way around the block. He's back scoring in Italy. He's kind of going through a who's who of teams in Serie A at the moment. He's with Napoli, like you said earlier, after leaving Chelsea on loan, and that when Todd came in to join Inter, then to Roma, now with Napoli, another 30 million when he left permanently, another 30 million euro. He left at the start of this season, August 2024. So yeah, Chelsea made some money back on him, but I imagine his Chelsea legacy from both his stints is a disappointing one, or one of frustration. And how do maybe Chelsea fans and maybe people around the club see him now, looking back at it, now that he's gone permanently and he's not going back for a third stint?
Yeah, well, a lot of the sort of Abramovich sort of officials have left Chelsea now, so I think there's a lot of sympathy with him from those people, and they kind of wish it went differently, and they thought it could work, and they think in a kind of, like I say, like in a different reality, it could have worked out. So I think that he's not seen as a bad guy, and I think he just sort of saw the opportunity to escape and be in a more comfortable environment, which he sort of did. Yeah, and to be fair to him as well, ever since that sort of bad interview he did that caused him trouble, he never caused trouble for Chelsea ever since. He's sort of almost, he doesn't talk about it. It's almost like a trauma that's untouched really from him. He's never really addressed the situation at Chelsea, how he left, how he kept going on loan and then eventually joined Napoli. So yeah, I think he feels a bit burned by the situation, a bit burned by maybe the media, the reaction, the way English football treated him. Also at United, I think he probably got a lot of criticism that was maybe, not unfounded, but maybe sometimes a bit over the top, which a lot of United players, I think, do get sometimes. So, yeah, I'd say that was sort of like his legacy. I think with the fans, it's a bad legacy, to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was looking at a social media post from one of my old employers' Goal, and they were asking a Chelsea fan, which players do you like the least who sort of left Chelsea? Chelsea fans sometimes dislike their ex-players a lot, and Lukaku, I think, I can't remember if he came out on top, but he's certainly up there on the ex-players they dislike the most. So, yeah, that episode still, with Tuchel, it still frustrates fans. And I think Tuchel's legend has also only grown at Chelsea, in the years that have happened since the ownership change, like him winning the Champions League. For many Chelsea fans, was the last moment they were truly, truly happy with the club. So, yeah, that's probably why his legacy is tarnished. But yeah, I think some parts of it could have been very different. There's several sliding door moments where we could be talking about a happier story, but it just all contrived to be sort of a failed transfer in reality. And you'd have to say that might be harsh language, but it's sort of, I think it's fair.
I think kind of people will be frustrated by what he could have been. And I think that applies to much of maybe the Belgian golden generation, with Belgium especially. He scored so many goals for Belgium, but they never kind of got over the finish line at international level. And Romelu Lukaku never got over the finish line at Chelsea. He did elsewhere, obviously he won trophies elsewhere, and his career overall will be remembered as a positive one. But his Chelsea stints plural, because he was there twice, obviously, but yeah, they won't go down in history the same. I think maybe he might speak about it one day, and his autobiography, whenever it does come, when he hangs up his boots, could be definitely worth a read.
And I do think that he will go down as a great striker. There's no doubt. He's Belgium's greatest ever striker. I mean, we can't, sometimes as football journalists, fans, everyone, like sometimes we're a bit harsh because we expect so much of people, but he's still got this legacy as Belgium's greatest ever player, sort of striker in Belgium's greatest ever team. So he's got a lot of good stuff on his CV. He's got titles, even if he didn't pick up that Champions League trophy that he wanted to. He certainly came to Chelsea to do that, by the way, in the second spell. So yeah, he's got a good CV. He's got all this. He's got a great goal scoring record wherever he's been, pretty much except Chelsea. So yeah, it's a good career, but I think a lot of people will compare him to people like Robert Lewandowski. Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi were around during his entire career pretty much as well. So he's getting compared with big stars, and maybe I'm being harsh again, but maybe he's not quite at their level, and that's probably where the criticism and frustration comes in. And maybe I'm being harsh there again saying that, but there's sort of a debate there whether he was really at the level. Well, we know he's not at the level of Ronaldo or Messi, but was he even at the level of Lewandowski? That's probably where people say, he probably wasn't quite as good as sort of the next tier of striker beside the two GOATs of world football.
Yeah, I think that's one for our commenters maybe to decide. They can let us know in the comments. Was he as good as Lewandowski, or where would you rank him as kind of one of the strikers of the past decade or 2 decades or so? Because yeah, he has been around a while.
In this generation, there's not as many good strikers, so maybe if he was born now and he was playing now, he would be considered better. So like that generation was a great era striker, and now we're in an era where we've got Haaland, right, and we've got a few good ones, but actually big number nines, they're sort of out of fashion and people want them, but there's not many around.
Yeah. So we need more Lukakus now than fewer. Yeah, that could be a good way to end the show. Yeah. So we have a football transfers app we launched recently. If you want to download it, it's available on on the App Store and Google Play if you want to get that. But yeah, thanks very much for your time, Nizaar. It's been much appreciated.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to catch up and go down memory lane.
Yeah. Me and Naz worked together once upon a time, many years ago. But two roads diverged since. Yeah.
I had we've had our transfers as well.
yeah. A big sign in graphics. Yeah. I hopefully it was more Inter than Chelsea for both of us.
Yeah. We'll see. No rogue interviews, hopefully, for me to damage my career. Yeah.
Wait till the bosses listen to this one.
Yeah.
So you've been listening to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, please follow, share, and rate us. Your support helps us bring you more news, analysis, and insight. You can message us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter and Bluesky address is at TransfersCast. Nizaar is on Twitter, Instagram, and Bluesky at Nizaar Kinsella. I'm on Twitter at Paul and on Bluesky at Ronan Murphy. Our production is by Mark Caulfield, a pro podcast production, and our music is by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for watching and listening.
He did the transfer window. He and McGarry, who left us and was a blue for a couple of years. Duncan was low. Now he's back with a new show. It's called The Transfers. It's where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. 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 Where everyone's gonna go.